Good morning, everybody. My name is Blair Innes, and I am the Government Relations Director here at the Maryland Center of Excellence on Problem Gambling. And before I get started with my presentation, I just wanted to go through a couple of housekeeping notes. So first of all, you will be awarded 1 hour CEU for attending today's webinar. And approximately 1 hour after the webinar concludes, you will receive an email with the webinar post quiz link from GoToWebinar. So cut and paste the link into your web browser, and then once you complete the post quiz, the certificate of attendance will be emailed to you from the center within 2 to 3 business days. Due to the number of attendees on today's webinar, we will keep the audience muted. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to use the question function. We'll be monitoring the questions during the webinar and respond back to you and all the attendees in real time. And please join us for our next webinar on Friday, February 26th, titled Have the Conversation, March Problem Gambling Awareness Month, presented by Heather Eshelman, the Center's Prevention Manager. All right, and let's get started with today's presentation. So today I will be talking about the 2021 Maryland General Assembly legislative session. I'll be giving an update and going through some of the gambling related bills. So just a brief outline overview of what I'll be talking about. So I want to give an overview of the legislative process. Then I'll talk a little bit about the center's role in Annapolis, which is where our General Assembly convenes every year. And then I'll discuss a few, not all, of the gambling bills of interest that we are following. Happy to answer questions about the bills I discuss and any other gambling related bills in Maryland that you might have questions about. So definitely use that question feature, please, guys. So first of all, let's talk about the legislative process. So a bill is introduced. So the first chamber and second chamber, we have 2 chambers. We have the House of Representatives and we have the Senate. And so say a bill is introduced in the Senate. It is read with the whole Senate listening to it, and then it's referred to a committee, which is a smaller section of the whole Senate. Within the committee, they read it again, and they discuss it. After discussion ends, they'll have their third reading, and once they agree on what that bill says, it crosses over to the second chamber. So if it started in the Senate, it goes into the House. If it started in the House, it goes into the Senate. That's the second chamber. Goes through the same process again in the second chamber before it is pushed back to the original chamber. So our bill started in the Senate, went to the House, and then it's pushed back to the Senate, where all of the Senate again convenes to consider the bill after it's gone through all of these processes. Possibly a conference committee is convened. It's not often that happens, only when necessary. And if not, then it will be given to the governor. That's called presentment. So it's presented to the governor and the governor signs it or vetoes it. Easy peasy, right? So the reality is that it looks much more like this. The legislative process is very involved, lots of twists and turns, changes everywhere. So it does always start the same. It starts in that first chamber, and we have that first reading and referral to committee. Once it gets to committee, a lot can happen. There's the hearing. Almost every bill that gets introduced gets the hearing. It's rare when a bill doesn't get a hearing. And so when it's in the committee, it's going to have that hearing. It's a time when members of the public and stakeholders all across the country are able to come in person or in writing to testify on a bill, give their opinion of the bill. Why do they think it's good? Why do they think it's bad? Do they think that something needs to be changed, right? That's the second part where it says amendments possible. So do stakeholders think that something needs to be amended or changed in the bill? Do the legislators, what have you? Sometimes it's even assigned to a subcommittee. If it's a very discrete topic, if the bill is based on a very discrete topic and there's a subcommittee that has a little bit more understanding or information on that specific topic, it's possible that it will be pushed to a subcommittee and have a separate hearing with the subcommittee, which may or may not include testimony from the public. But after all of that happens, they look at what this new version of the bill looks like with any amendments that have been added, with any changes that the subcommittee have made. They'll look at it again. That is our second reading. After the second reading, it's again a time where it's possible for amendments to be made. This is not a time when the public is going to come and testify. So the amendments are likely going to come from internal members of the committee or the General Assembly at large. This is also a time, or all of this really is a time, when even though the bill is in the Senate, it's very likely that there are members of the House of Representatives who are also talking to their their colleagues in the Senate and negotiating, wheeling and dealing what changes or amendments or edits or what they want taken out of a bill or anything like that. So this can all be happening during this time between this after the second reading. So we get through all of that process, and then we have what is called the third reading. We have a highly marked up bill. I didn't put it in here, but sometimes for fun, I show people what a bill can look like after going through this amendment process. Sometimes it's like unrecognizable. You can't even read it. There's so many strikeouts because they don't, when they're amending the bill, they don't like delete the language and then type out a clean copy with the new language. It looks like they're working in track changes. So they're actually striking through the language and then next to it writing the new language. There's a whole system. There's actually a manual that tells you how to read these bills because there's a whole system on how to do it. So it is amusing sometimes to see these bills. So, but yeah, so the third reading comes, and if our first chamber is all of the senators, if we're in the Senate, are able to agree on all of the amendments that we've seen, then they're going to pass that over and it's going to cross over to the second chamber. So let's cross it over to the House. It's going to go through the same process again. There are still opportunities for amendment. There is still a hearing and members of the public can testify again as before. Sometimes the hearing does not allow in-person testimony if it's a bill that hasn't been amended a lot, it's not a very contentious bill. Just for the interest of time, sometimes they'll only allow members of the public to submit written testimony in this second chamber. But it does depend on the bill. But regardless, members of the public and stakeholders and interested parties do have the right and ability to submit their opinion and their testimony on the now amended version of the bill. Then once that's all done, we have our second reading. Again, possibilities for amendment before we get to our third reading. So if a bill can get through all of that, then it goes to final passage. It goes back to the Senate or the original chamber. The Senate all reads the bill again and then votes on whether they think the bill should be presented to the governor for presentment. So I'm going to skip conference committee because this is taking forever. So let's say that it gets through all that and it goes to the governor. Now, the governor can do a few things. The governor can do nothing. A bill can be presented to the governor, and if the governor doesn't sign it within a certain amount of time, then that bill still becomes law. A lot of times a governor, or at least my experience here in Maryland, a lot of times the governor doesn't sign a bill to make a statement, a political statement, like I'm not going to block this, but I do not actually support it. So they just let it slide. Other times the governor actively supports the bill and he wants to sign it. And it's a big deal when the governor signs your bill. We get a list of bill signing dates and times so that we can, well, before COVID, we could actually go and show up and watch him sign it. Usually there's members of the media taking pictures. Some of the more involved advocates for the bill oftentimes will be in those pictures with the governor as the governor is signing their bill. It's a very big deal. It's an exciting time. A lot of hard work goes into getting to that point. So always really fun to see those pictures at the end of session in like April and May. However, the governor can also veto a bill, meaning the governor does not approve this bill. This happened with a good number of our bills in the 2020 session, that any bills that were increasing taxes or adding new fees and really just make financial potentially causing financial hardship to people who are already experiencing financial hardship due to COVID-19. The governor said that he would and did end up vetoing most of those bills. So this happened to one particular bill that I was working on that had to do with tobacco taxes. And the advocates, the national organizations that were the primary advocates for that bill, decided that they wanted to go to the General Assembly again and say, can you please override the veto? So we know the governor said, no, this cannot become law, but can you, Maryland General Assembly, say it can become law? So the veto override process is long, which I'm sure comes as no surprise considering how long I've been talking about the rest of the process. And basically, as long as a certain majority of the Senate and of the House vote in favor of overriding the veto, then even though the governor said no to that bill, it can still become law. That happens in the next session. So the tobacco bill that I'm talking about that was vetoed in the 2020 session, the House just passed the veto override yesterday, and we're waiting to hear from the Senate. So you can see it's a long process, and a lot of lobbying on behalf of the national advocates had to happen to get to that point. So the role that we play at the Center of Excellence. So first of all, my big responsibility during legislative session is to monitor what's happening. I have a spreadsheet that includes not just all of the gambling bills, but a good number of public health bills, and we do it on Google Docs so that it is updated in real time and people can see it live. That is one of the most important parts of my position here at the center. Also talking to members. So I'm going to talk in a slide or two about lobbying, which is not something that I can do as a state employee, but I'm always available to answer questions to members of the General Assembly. I also do make my face shown, and some of the other members of the center will make sure that the legislators know what our faces look like, so that they know that we are some experts in this particular area in the state of Maryland that they can come to. We also, even without them asking, provide one-pagers and general information about certain things, with sports betting being one of the hottest, probably the hottest topic this session here in Maryland. We wanted to make sure that legislators understood what the impact of sports betting can look like from a problem or responsible gambling lens. So we did create information sheets that we shared with them, obviously giving them our contact information, being available for them. Also educating the public. It's not something that we do as often, but as an example, we worked on information for some of the voting sessions that happened last year around sports betting. People are always welcome to come in. Of course, we have all of our social media and our website and what have you like that. And then hearings. So I don't testify on every gambling bill, but usually some of the bigger ones, or if there's something that really needs to be made clear in a bill, or clarified in a bill, or amended in a bill, then we at the center will what we call take a position and at least send a letter to the committee that's hearing the bill. Sometimes we'll show up in person and definitely I'll talk more about that later as well. So, but how am I limited? Again, I, as a state employee, am not able to lobby, but I can advocate. I say that I advocate zealously. So the differences are kind of minute. So lobbying means to conduct activities aimed at influencing public officials, and especially members of a legislative body, on legislation, versus advocacy, which is the act or process of supporting a particular cause or proposal. So I will generally talk about sports betting, for instance. And when I'm going, I can ask general questions, or I can answer general questions about the impact of a bill or something like that. Do I say that the Maryland Center of Excellence supports this bill or opposes this bill? No, that's not something that we would say. But definitely there are ways to get our opinion and our stance heard without also breaking the law. So I love when we are able to be in Annapolis, which we obviously can't be this year. Everything is online. But I love to be there, and I will just quote unquote bump into a legislator who's working on a particular bill of interest for me and just have a casual conversation with them about the bill and just talking in a friendly way. No lobbying, no pushing, no special dinners or presents or anything like that, although I wouldn't be mad if I got a special dinner, that's for sure. But none of that happens. And this is true for any state employee. So members of the health department, many members of any administration are able to advocate, assuming that obviously their employers are comfortable with it, are able to advocate. And it's something that I personally really encourage. Being involved in the legislative process is so rewarding and also so beneficial to the people of Maryland, because legislators don't necessarily have the same knowledge that we all have. So we have to share that with them and really educate them. So I love that part of the job for sure. So Maryland legislative session, I lost the slide. So the 2021 Maryland legislative session runs from January 13th to April 12th. And it has changed a little bit due to COVID. Actually, a lot. It's changed a lot and I'm not going to go through everything that's new, but everything is online. Everything's on Zoom now, and they're not even having in-person meetings with the lobbyists or with members of the press, which normally legislators will do. Also, a big change that has definitely impacted our work in session is that the Senate is limiting the number of people who can testify on a bill. Normally, if you sign up, you get to testify. But for whatever reason, they obviously didn't give us the reason why they did that, but for whatever reason, they said that only a certain number of people, and it's very limited. The Senate is only allowing 4 people to testify on each position. So 4 people can testify in support and 4 people in opposition to a bill. I mean, it's very limited. The House isn't limiting it yet, but they absolutely could. There's nothing saying that they can't change their minds and start limiting it or what have you. So those are kind of some of the big changes that have been happening. There's also some other, like we submit testimony in a different way and stuff like that, but that's not as impactful. The other important thing to note here is that first of all, there was a big push to get bills pre-filed. So a bill filed before legislative session began on January 13th. It meant that in years where we are going to Annapolis, we usually have a week or two before we start having hearings. With the pre-files, it meant we started having hearings. I think the first hearing happened on January 14th. It was such a fast turnaround. There were 781 bills pre-filed. That is unheard of. Usually, it's not unusual to get 100 or 200, but almost 800, definitely unheard of. I mean, now we're in the thousands, which is normal. But the big thing is that they also changed the bill introduction date. So there is a date by which, and it's different for the House and Senate, as you can see, but there's a date by which a sponsor needs to introduce their bill to be guaranteed a hearing. If they don't meet that date, that deadline, it doesn't mean that their bill won't have a hearing. What it does mean is it has an extra hurdle to jump over, and it goes to a special committee called the Rules Committee. It is, I would say, less than 50% of the time a bill gets out of the Rules Committee and actually has a hearing and goes anywhere. So you do not want to miss these bill introduction dates. These are important because both of these dates have passed. So all the bills that I'm tracking and the bills I'll be talking about today, I don't anticipate any additional gambling bills coming up this session, especially also because all of the bills we were expecting to see for gambling, we have seen, and then some. So there are 30 gambling bills that I'm tracking in total. Don't worry, we're not going to talk about all of them, though. I'm just going to go through some of the bigger ones that have been taking up a lot of our attention. So the first one, House Bill 553. This is, I say this a lot, I think things are very interesting that plenty of other people disagree with me on. But this one I do find very interesting. So there is a bill, or there's a law in Maryland that says it is illegal for the state lottery and gaming control agency to sell lottery tickets through the internet. And so this bill would repeal that so that people can buy lottery tickets through the internet. So in the hearing, the delegate who introduced the bill testified that this bill came about because the lottery does these things called subscriptions, where a person can subscribe online to have the same numbers played every week in certain lottery games. In order to sign up for a subscription, you actually have to go to the website, print out the form, and then mail it in. So they're using snail mail, and they just think that it's inconvenient and impractical to do it that way. So they want people to be able to sign up for it online. Now, there has been strong opposition to this bill, as I'm sure some of you can imagine. So the gas stations where they sell these, the liquor stores where they sell lottery tickets, the convenience stores where they sell lottery tickets, all of them are saying, no, this will limit our traffic, right? Because of course, a person doesn't just go into the convenience store and buy a lottery ticket and leave. Like, no, they buy a snack, they buy the drink, maybe they buy their cigarettes, right? Like, they're buying more things, even though they only went in to get a lottery ticket. So lots of opposition, lots of talk of amendments. And the delegate who introduced the bill actually did say, this might not be the year for this bill. Maybe we just need to open up a conversation about it. So not one that I'm tracking super, super hard. It doesn't seem like it's going to go anywhere this year, but it definitely feels like it could go somewhere in future years. Also, something very interesting that came out of this hearing is that this is for iLottery. Another delegate in that hearing said that he actually wanted to, this session, introduce a bill for iCasinos and iGaming. And the Maryland Office of the Attorney General said, based on the Maryland Constitution, there are a couple of extra steps that would take, so he couldn't introduce it this year. But it was a clear indication that at least there's interest in also including bringing iGaming to Maryland. So I think something to watch in the future for sure. All right, Senate Bill 24, House Bill 897. This bill requires the Lottery and Gaming Control Commission to issue a sports betting license to the Maryland State Fair. The full name is Maryland State Fair and Agricultural Society, but it's the Maryland State Fair. This bill actually the House bill has been withdrawn by the sponsor, and the sponsor let us know that it was actually the State Fair requested that he withdraw it. I assume that the Senate bill will also be withdrawn, and I will explain more about my best guess as to why that happened in a few slides. It's Senate Bill 243, Public High Schools, Health, Education, Gambling, Dangers, and Addictions. This is actually the second year that this bill has been introduced. The center did testify in person last year in support of this bill at the request of the senator who introduced the bill, Senator Simonaire. This year, though, again, because of all the COVID restrictions, this bill was sponsor only, so it meant that nobody besides the sponsor submitted or gave in-person testimony. We did submit a letter of support on this bill this year. This would require the State Department of Education to develop a program for high school students to learn about the dangers and addictions associated with gambling. And then it's a one-time program required. It's a program required one time in all of their high school careers. So there are programs that already exist. Educational programs like this that already exist. That was part of what we shared, was we can get more information on those programs to really help the State Department of Education guide them in what they would want to write for this program. So last year, people were generally very neutral on this bill last year. There was some opposition, especially from the Board of Education. They really hate legislating particular educational programs, which is totally understandable, I think. However, less opposition this year. They actually didn't oppose it this year. So again, this is a clear example of what can happen in the interim during when session is out, and how the lobbyists and even sometimes the advocates can get involved and really massage the issue in a way that can make it more palatable to a lot of people. although this bill actually didn't change, like the bill text didn't change from last year. So I guess the backdoor conversations, to which many of us are not privy, there must have been some agreements made as to what this program would look like. So we'll see. It had a hearing. Like I said, it was just a sponsor-only testimony, so nothing really came out, like no tidbits came out as to what we can expect moving forward. So we're just waiting for the committee to vote and see if there are any amendments or what have you. So we'll keep going and seeing what happens there. And this is our sports betting bill. So House Bill 940, gaming, regulation of fantasy gaming competitions and implementation of sports wagering. This is a 34-page mammoth bill. I will admit, not the biggest bill I've ever read, but not the shortest. And it's very involved, a lot in it. So here are some of just like the main highlights of the bill. First of all, the Lottery and Gaming Control Commission would be the regulatory body. This bill provides for all kinds of betting: in-person betting, online betting, and self-service kiosk machines. There are a variety of licensees accounted for in the bill. So casinos and racetracks are accounted for in the bill. And then up to 5 other applicants can receive a license, and up to 10 mobile sports wagering licenses. Worth noting that the bill says that each brick and mortar can only have 1 sports wagering license. So, but regardless, there might not be enough mobile sports wagering licenses to go around. So I think it'll be interesting to see who gets it and for what reason. And then the particular sports that can be bet on are horse racing, professional baseball or football, and then anything else approved by the Sports Wagering Application Review Commission, which is a new commission created by this bill. I don't know if this is a useful slide. I was trying to get artsy, craftsy here. That might not have worked out as well as I had hoped. So I'm sorry if I'm just giving you a headache with all of these images. But I just wanted to point out, this is Maryland. We have 24 counties. And this is where, based on the bill, this is where the casinos and racetracks are. Now, I will point out that the bill does not guarantee that each casino and each racetrack will receive a license. They do have to apply for it and be approved, but I think we can all be pretty confident that they're all going to be approved, right? So it's assuming that they're all approved, this is where we will have, where we are basically guaranteed to have sports betting in person. So we have 6 casinos in Maryland. That's the MGM National Harbor, Horseshoe Casino, Live Casino and Hotel, the Ocean Downs, Rocky Gap, Ocean Downs, Rocky Gap, and Hollywood Casino. And then we have 5 racetracks. We have Pimlico, Laurel Park, Rose Cross Raceway, and the Maryland State Fair is actually a racetrack. So also, I said 5, I only said 4 things though. Ocean Downs, it's the casino and racetrack. So they would, actually, I'm not gonna, okay. So the Maryland State Fair, this is why that bill was pulled previously. It was really interesting. There was a subcommittee hearing where the Maryland State Fair basically made their case for why they should get a license. And they said, the bill hadn't dropped yet. The bill hadn't been introduced yet. So we didn't know for a fact who would be eligible to apply for a license. But the president of the director of the state fair said that there was a rumor going around that only casinos were going to be given these options for licenses. So the fair wanted to get in front of the subcommittee and like show them why they deserved a license. And they talked about the fair being not a nonprofit organization. And so the money that they receive goes back into the community. Also the fact that they are located in Baltimore County, which if you're looking at the map, it's the top far right is Cecil County, and then right next to that is Baltimore County, where the lightning bolts are. They would be the only sports betting licensee potentially in Baltimore County, and would obviously feed into a lot of other counties, as you can see from this map. So yeah, so they made their case. So that is apparently why the bill was introduced, because they were not sure that it would go to anyone other than casinos. And then when it became clear in the bill that as a racetrack, they can apply for a license that way, they were willing to withdraw the bill. So there are also a few bills that require the bills that other businesses have put in, hoping to also throw their hat in the ring and get their get a sports betting license. So, of course, the first one we've already talked about. The second one, Senate Bill 850, House Bill 1224. This one would require long shots to get a sports betting license. Long Shots is a sports bar in the Clarion Inn in Frederick, Maryland. And then the second one, Senate Bill 871, Gaming, Sports and Events Wagering License, Washington County Minor League Baseball Team. This would require the owner of a professional minor league baseball team located specifically in Washington County to get a license. So let's just back it up. You can see Washington County is that far left green county. They do have a casino there already. So this would be their second one. So right now, the name of their minor league sports betting or minor league baseball team, if you're interested, is the Hagerstown Suns. I did not know that. I had to look that up. No, I'm not a minor league baseball fan. So neither of these last two bills have had hearings yet. Both of their hearings are in March. So I think it will be very telling to see if either of these bills pass. I honestly don't know that they will, but it'll be good to see. The long shots one, there has been a really pretty strong media campaign in support of that bill. The Frederick County delegation and the Frederick County Council and what have you are understandably very supportive of that, considering the revenue that it could potentially bring in. So that is it, actually, for my legislative update. The only other thing I want to say is that in coordination with the University of Maryland School of Law, we have students and lawyers who are tracking a variety of public health bills. So these are just some of them: gambling, injury prevention, tobacco, marijuana, alcohol, opioids, and the COVID-19 pandemic. There are others: school health, food, motor vehicles. So all that to say, if you are interested in seeing this Google Doc of real-time edits to a variety of public health bills, feel free to send an email to publichealth@law.umaryland.edu to be added to the legislative listserv. Emails go out once a week, although the tracker, you would get a link to the tracker that you could check anytime that you wanted to. And then every other week, there is a legislative update phone call where law students and lawyers at the law school talk about some of the higher interest or higher profile bills that are coming up in all of these subject areas, and really great conversation with members of the various administrations and various public interest groups who talk about their bills and what have you. So it's a really helpful conversation to those who are interested in tracking bills. So feel free to send an email to that address. And with that, that is everything I have. Please feel free to ask any questions. All right, well, with no questions to be seen, I guess this will end our webinar. Again, please join us for our next webinar on Friday, February 26th, titled Have the Conversation, March Problem Gambling Awareness Month, presented by Heather Eshelman, who's the Center's Prevention Manager. Thank you so much for joining today, and have a great weekend.